Get this. A bill is so popular that it passes through all of Congress with not a single no vote. Can you imagine that? A moment of total, complete unity. But then it gets to the president's desk, and it's immediately vetoed. Now, this isn't some hypothetical classroom example. This actually happened. And in this explainer, we're going to unpack exactly why a sure-thing piece of legislation was stopped dead in its tracks. So that brings us to the big question, right? Why on earth would a president veto a completely popular bill, especially one that was sponsored by a close political ally? I mean, it just doesn't seem to make any political sense. Well, the source material we're looking at today points to a really fascinating story of loyalty, pressure, and what one representative is calling political payback. Okay, so first things first, let's actually look at the legislation itself. Because on the surface, this seemed like the absolute last bill you'd ever expect to cause a political firestorm. The bill was called the Finish the Arkansas Valley Conduit Act. Just from the name, you can tell it's a pretty straightforward infrastructure project. You know, the kind of bill that usually sails through Congress with very little drama. And for a while, that's exactly what happened here. The whole purpose of the bill was super simple. Fund a pipeline to bring clean drinking water to 39 different communities in Colorado. We're talking about something that would affect about 50,000 people. And it was sponsored by Representative Boebert, who was known as a very close political ally of the president. So by all accounts, this should have been a really easy win for everybody involved. So let's just recap this journey, because it's wild. The bill passes unanimously in the House. Then it passes unanimously in the Senate. It had 100% bipartisan support, and it was sponsored by an ally. And yet, the final outcome was a veto. It's this huge contrast that makes this story so compelling and really points to some kind of powerful behind-the-scenes conflict. Now, to understand that veto, our source material says we have to look at a totally different event that happened right before it, a really contentious vote that was all about releasing the Jeffrey Epstein files. So the key thing to understand here is this mechanism called a discharge petition. To put it simply, it's a tool in the House of Representatives that can force a vote on a bill, even if the party leadership doesn't want to. And in this case, it was being used to force a vote on a bill demanding the release of files related to Jeffrey Epstein. And this is exactly where Representative Boebert played a huge role. She became one of only 4 Republicans to sign that petition. Now, according to the source, this act of defiance got her summons to the White House Situation Room, and there she reportedly met with top officials, including the Attorney General and the FBI director, who apparently pressured her to take her name off the list. But Boebert refused. She didn't back down, and because of that, the vote moved forward. And according to the source material we're examining, that act of defiance is the key to this whole story. It says it directly led to the veto and set the stage for a pretty serious accusation of political retaliation. You see, right after her bill was vetoed, Representative Boebert put out a statement, and her words were sharp. She said, "I sincerely hope this veto has nothing to do with political retaliation." And with that one public statement, she drew a direct line between her refusal to back down on the Epstein vote and the sudden death of her clean water bill. So the argument coming from our source material is crystal clear. This was no coincidence. The veto of that water project was allegedly direct political payback for Boebert refusing to bend on the Epstein vote. Then the source zooms out a bit, and it argues that this whole incident isn't just a one-off thing. Instead, it says it fits into what it describes as a recurring pattern of behavior from the administration. The analysis we're looking at defines this pattern as one-way loyalty, and the idea is pretty simple. 100% absolute loyalty is demanded from all allies, but that loyalty doesn't necessarily get returned. The moment an ally steps even a tiny bit out of line or shows some independence, they are, in the source's words, excommunicado. They're just cut off completely. And to back this claim up, the source points to what it calls a trail of discarded former allies. It lists a whole bunch of high-profile figures who were once really close to the administration, but were basically cast aside after some kind of public disagreement. For instance, it mentions former Vice President Mike Pence, who broke with the president over January 6th, and the former RNC chair, Ronna McDaniel, who was pushed out after some election losses. The argument here is that what happened to Boebert's bill isn't some strange anomaly, but it's just the latest example in a very long pattern of punishing anyone who's seen as disloyal. So, okay, besides all the political drama, what's the real-world impact of all this? Well, the source material argues it directly affects the lives of everyday people. And this is really the core takeaway. The source argues that this story isn't just about politicians fighting with each other. It's an example where alleged political retaliation got in the way of what constituents actually needed. Remember, those 50,000 people back in Colorado waiting for clean drinking water? Well, their project, a project that had unanimous political support, got caught right in the crossfire. Which leaves us with this final question to think about. The story of this veto, at least as it's framed by our source, presents this really stark collision between the demands of personal loyalty on one side and the goals of public policy on the other. And it kind of forces us to ask, which one ultimately wins out? And what are the consequences for the rest of us?
Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe to the Centerline Reports YouTube channel.